Welcome, 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 and thank you so very much for joining me for another episode of Talking Cloud. My name's Grant Asplin. Man, I'm so jazzed today because, I love talking with people that are way smarter than me, which isn't hard to find. But today, man, we got a guy who's, you know, rather than running through the LinkedIn profile like I normally will do, we've had him on the program before. So if you want to hear that preamble, go dig it up. Um, but I'm going to tell a different story, and it was how we met. Because I was at Blue Coat Systems and they were going through some major transformation. I mean, these guys had, I think, like 97 out of the Fortune 100 as a customer, but they just were like totally hitting the wall on strategy, and they were just doing kind of unnatural things with their product to try to make it compete in other markets. And so Thoma Bravo saw the opportunity, came in, takes the company private, whacks off a third of the company, and then rebuilds with some amazing muscle. And this is some of that rebuild. Venkat, I met, he was the vice president of engineering. If I remember correctly, he'll correct me if I'm wrong. And he was fairly new to the company, and I somehow managed to dodge the riff, and it was at the airport. And I remember, and I saw him, and anybody who knows me knows I'm really kind of a bashful and shy guy. But today, this day, I felt brave enough, and I walked up and I introduced myself, and we've been friends ever since. And it's been terrific. It wasn't like, he immediately invited me to stay over the night at his house and play in his backyard or anything, but we've been, we stayed in contact. Well, he now is the co-founder and CEO of a very cloud native, cloud centric, security oriented, right on the edge company. It's called Stack Identity. And I'm super jazzed to shut up now and have a conversation with Venkat Raghavan. Venkat, hey man, thanks so much for coming on the program again. I really do appreciate it.
Hey, Grant. Thanks. I can't believe it's 14 years now. It's unbelievable. Time just flies.
Oh my gosh, I
It's
didn't put a number
2012.
on it. Yeah, that's extraordinary. That's right, it was. And you know what? It's almost like an anniversary for us, I think, coming up, because it was on Valentine's Day in 2012 when
Private. Yes.
the hammer dropped,
Yeah.
as they say. That was the announcement day. I remember that specifically. So wow, that's crazy. Well, man, I want to jump right in, and certainly for the edification of everyone listening, I want you to kind of first pause and let's give everybody kind of an understanding of Stack Identity. But let me just first give a plug and say, you got to take a look at this company. It's really amazing. Started by some brilliant guys. So I'm going to tell some story for those of you listening that remember that transition with Blue Coat Systems, because a lot of my audience, I think, is in and from that era and remembers these companies. Blue Coat went out and did some amazing building through Thoma Bravo, and we bought and acquired a number of companies, and one of them was this company called Solera Networks. And it was so cool because I remember the era, 2012, it was a VCR for your network traffic. And so literally your TV, I mean, your monitor turned into this, what appeared to be this flowing river of all the different traffic types. And it was all recorded. And you could say, I don't want to see HTTP. I don't want to see this type. And it would just magically disappear. I mean, it was a revolutionary and super cool product. Well, the guy who led development and engineering for that company, he's the co-founder with Venkat. Venkat, I mean, I'm going to let him tell you. His history goes back, what, 15 or 16 or something years with IBM. He's like, was on the original committee or
Mm.
group that formed SAML 1.0. I mean, anyway, okay, I said I was going to shut up. Now I am. So Venkat, tell everybody about Stack. Tell everybody about the problem you saw and what you guys are wrestling with, and we'll go from there. And sorry for babbling on so long.
Hey, thanks, Grant. Yeah, I think it's just a phenomenal journey looking back at the history. I cut my teeth in identity, like you said, Samuel, way back when. And now we look back, we have built the market is, demanding more identity, single sign-on, authentication. This is all the rage now. And I was very fortunate to build these first products as part of the Java era, as Java took off.
Yeah.
People are building online, applications, real estate. All the banks were in online. Now we take it for granted, but all these things are now become of the Java era. And so, I was very fortunate to build, a great company that IBM acquired, a company called Dascom, and so that sort of led my journey into the identity and access management space, which is the biggest market we have right now. And it's
What was the
interesting.
year? What was the
That was
year that IBM acquired?
just 2000. I remember that was the Y2K. Remember the Y2K
Sure.
rage?
Oh yeah,
So
the sky's
that was
falling. The
Y2K.
world's going to end.
Yeah, world's going to end, exactly. So fortunately, the world did not end, and so we ran up a fantastic business serving a lot of Fortune, very similar to the Blue Coat customer profile. IBM had a great profile of customers, mostly Fortune Global 2000 customers, and within that, the Global 500 was a massive install base for us. So 8 years into the journey, lots more products. We saw that recession, right? Lehman Brothers collapse, that big thing happened in the
Oh,
market.
oh
Okay, and
eight.
then all of a sudden, the cloud shows up with AWS, and so now we are on the cloud era. We went from Java to the
Yep.
cloud era,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and uh, and so now we got to start to rebuild some of the identity foundations for the cloud era.
Right.
Now, you fast forward to 2015, now we get this thing called Kubernetes. I'm like, what is this?
Mm.
And so now, that is showing us a new cloud native era where things are built natively on the cloud. Wow. Okay, now we got to look at identity and say, wait a minute, we got to rebuild some of these foundations we built for the cloud era on this cloud native era. Lo and
Mm-hmm.
behold, now, come around 2020, kind of pre-COVID, a company called Snowflake shows up. Massive data platforms, zettabytes of data. They're building this new category of data applications. Oh, wow. Okay, now identity has to be understood in a data context. That's pretty interesting.
Mm.
Now, 3 years into this, not even era, last year we saw ChatGPT. Now we're seeing the next era unfolding. So
Yeah.
if you look back in history, very been fortunate as part of three eras. And what's common across all these three eras is identity and its access. That is always the problem for customers. So when we talk to customers every day, identity is part of their big growth initiatives. They're building new applications, they're opening up the data to third parties. Everything's API based, so building data products, but they're relying on identity as a foundation for that. And
Yep.
so the cloud security, the cloud pieces are now morphed into identity security. So that's a big, we've gone from identity being, a basic, productivity enabler to now, 20 years later, it's become a foundation of security. And that's a change that customers are reacting to. It's been a fantastic ride of the last 2 decades.
And it seems, and remember, you're the professor and I'm the Gilligan, but it seems like uh, identity is getting more granular, right? I mean, it's not just a person and an application that you have access to and then you're in, right? It's who are you and Whoa, okay, yeah, you're a person that's part of the company, but everything has gotten so much more granular. Obviously, that's part of, I think, zero trust, right? This whole notion that you're 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 interrogating everything, not assuming anything. But identity seems to be going that
Mhm.
way also. And as applications become native and they become dispersed and more granular, thus the identity has to follow, right? Am I right or am I missing it?
No, absolutely. I think we have everything now has an identity, right? It's not just humans like you and me. It's
Right.
teams, it's workloads, its APIs have identities, and because they act like you and I, they read data, they export data, and things like that. ChatGPT wants to get access to your data. So
Yep.
we're seeing a world where now we're seeing a massive volume of identities showing up because everything is now grounded in an identity. Okay, and there's no difference between a human being, needing access to an application and another application using an API to access some other application via an identity. So that's a big
Yep.
change we've seen in the last 2 3 eras. Is really everything is built on a foundation of identity, and that's good because then you can start to authenticate the identity. You can start to verify the identity. You can
Right.
always trust, and the zero trust aspects lend itself really well to an identity
Exactly.
centric world. And to pick up on your
Exactly.
point on granularity, it's not access to just infrastructure; it's access to data. And where we see, if you talk to customers, they're all building. Their teams are building very interesting applications using data. And data and AI is really the fuel now to build applications. So we're seeing a world right now where people are building thousands of applications, data products, and they're sharing this with their customers, and they're co-building some of these products with their partners. So there's a big identity ecosystem that's emerging, right?
Hmm.
It's got to be very, very granular. What data is being shared with whom, and why, and what purpose? So these are all
Right.
very hard questions that I think our customers are saying. Look, we built a foundation of access management, but that was 20 years ago. The world is quite different right now. How do we help us get to the next stage of
Yep.
being very productive and still be secure in our environments?
So an identity, one of the fundamental things I think about is the only reason I create an identity is to have an associated policy or privilege or capability. Otherwise, you're public. You know what I mean? It's like it is part and parcel to an identity. It is an associated capability that you are going to tie with that. I guess, right? An entitlement or a capability, and that's part of it too, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the only reason for an identity to exist is because you're trying to control some access for the
Right,
identity. Otherwise, you don't need an identity. You can just have public access, right? So, so the identity in its fullest definition includes all the access it has been granted, right? Access to do things. For
right,
example, if you look at, for example, an EC2 instance, which is a workload in AWS, that needs an identity to spin up resources in the cloud.
right,
If it's a human being, we have access to our Salesforce and our databases and our various SaaS applications for us to do a regular job. If you have an API that periodically takes data from one platform and then does a little bit of an analytics around it, that API needs an identity and its access. So you cannot divorce identity and access; they all go together. But the important thing is now identity is now not just thought about as humans, but increasingly non-humans. Because in the cloud, and particularly in these modern environments, the nature of work is automated, right? Everything is automated in API base. So identity is grown on in a much bigger way, but access and entitlements attached to identity is also the bigger component, and these two kind of go together.
So it seems like what often happens is in really big problems in the market, you have a lot of people claiming they solve it. Identity is one of them, it seems. But it seems like there's a huge disparity between what the enterprise platform CSPM tool or SIM tool does versus what Stack does. Talk a little bit about the approaches to the problems you're solving.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, to make it very simple, right? Identity is always a life cycle. So, for example, right, we have identities that allow us to log in to services.
Hmm.
So we can now copy and paste data. We can download. We can export, and we can share the data with other applications. So we have the ability to do that. So now the big question is, are the identities authorized to do that function? And that's where the challenge comes in. So what we're talking about is how do we simplify and manage the risk of access, right, to an identity. So if you're not supposed to have that access, so somebody should remove the access.
Right.
And so, for example, if you look at an attacker, they find a weak link and they enter your environment, so they're able to then use legitimate access to gain access to data and exploit data. So all the attacks I've seen in the last 4 or 5 years is legitimate access, and that's a
Right.
risk. So you have to give access to an identity. The question is whether the identity is a good one or a fraud. That's the question we're trying
Hmm.
to answer. So all these other platforms, of course, this identity notion is not unique to just the cloud. It is unique to all the identities. For example, companies have identities where they're managing employee populations, they're managing contractors, they're managing third parties, they're managing different environments in which access is provided. They're managing internal applications, they're managing cloud, they're managing data environments, they're using APIs. So all this ties back to the universe of the problem we're looking at is identity and access. That's where we're looking at. And then how does it fan out to various environments the customers are building applications around? Now, other products and technologies come from a different perspective. They look at it from a SOC perspective. Hey, I want to look at identity events that are risky from a SOC perspective. Okay, that's a good use case. But at the end of the day, the problem for customers is how do I prevent unauthorized access? Because if they can prevent unauthorized access through some automation, then they can lock it down. And that's what they're struggling with, right? So the problem we're trying to solve is how do we start to understand identities and its behaviors? So at any point in time, customers are assured and have the trust that the environment is operating to their own policies. And we kind of talk about this, the right access for the right identity, for the right reasons, and for the right duration. So
Right.
that's the simple way to
And that's
describe
the
what we do.
granularity, I guess. That's the granularity that I was kind of referring
Exactly.
to, where
Exactly.
the old days it was, oh, it's Venkat, and that's it. You have a card key, you get in, and
Yeah.
then once you're in,
Yeah.
your username and password one time, and you're done. Everything pops up on your desktop. All the drives are mapped. All the apps are there, right? I mean, done. And and we're in a different world today when I'm at home, right? And I don't have my laptop, so I've got to use a different one and try to do work. When I think of all the checks, balances, identities, applications, what's included to allow that capability versus the old card key, I'm in, username, password, done. It's a world of difference.
Exactly. I mean, if you recall, maybe even like a decade ago, from Blue Coat days, we had APTs, Advanced Persistent Threats. That was all the rage. People are creating APTs. Okay, all this designer malware. Well,
Yep.
today there's no need for that. Don't stress yourself. All I need is a legitimate access of Grant. I'll just hack into Grant's account. I log in as
Right.
Grant, get to the data. I'm done. So
And
identities
this
become
we've heard a lot of this too, right? I mean, it certainly seems like there's been numerous examples of a stolen identity.
Yeah,
And that's the vector that allows the lateral
that's the
movement, that
easiest.
allows the exploitation. And you've got a smart person that's stolen that identity. So it's not the Joe user that maybe the guy
Yeah,
in IT who set Grant up just did a next okay. And he's got much more capability than Grant knows, but Grant's a Gilligan, so he's never used it. But the hacker knows, right? So
exactly.
he's thinking, hey, man, I got the perfect identity.
It's amazing if you go back to the last 20, 25 data breaches, and Verizon talks about this in the report extensively. It's all about legitimate access and credentials. It's just mind-boggling to me. It's just one attribution. So the moment you give access to identity, you actually increase the attack surface, right? That's a problem we're seeing.
Exactly.
So struggle customers have is how do I start to bring it down and make sure they can lock their environments down, and that's a big challenge. And the reason part of the challenge now versus 10 years ago is the cloud. Now you can spin up a MongoDB instance in 30 seconds, copy data, open up access to your through an API to your third parties, and you've gone to the next project.
Yep. Yep.
You're sitting there now
Yep.
the data with complete access through an API. Who's
Yep.
watching this type of environments? Okay, so
Right.
we're seeing a very high degree of things that used to take 6 months takes 30 seconds, and so that's going to only get worse with AI and whatnot. So the challenge is kind of who's watching your identities, who's watching your access. So that's the perspective we come in to help customers, fix their problems, their gaps in their identity and access management solutions,
Yep.
and so that they can start to drive into some of the bigger growth initiatives.
I'm just going to read what we were talking about earlier, in that paper, Exploding Cloud Identity Threats and Their Impacts. This sentence I just think is really spot on. The increase in cloud computing security risks is inseparable from the growing sophistication and number of identity security threats. I just think that sums it up on you can't separate the
Yeah,
two.
yeah. Think about it. What you just said. We used to call it identity and access management. That used
Right.
to be the now we're calling it identity security market. We've made a big shift the way we think about identity, we talk
Right.
about identity. And so this was not a discussion 10 years ago. And this is where the challenge is because everything in the digital world is all identity based. So whether it's devices or humans or non-humans and whatnot. So how do we make identity a first class citizen in our
Right.
thought process, in our process, that's the big change that I think we're bringing in. So stack identity is definitely looking at pioneering an approach around, hey, how do I look at this problem. In fact, we're not just saying it ourselves. If you look at the Cloud Security Alliance, they're calling it shadow access,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
meaning it's like very similar to shadow IT, right? Kind of a decade ago, it's shadow access, things you're not seeing,
Right.
things things you didn't give access to those things, but they got access somehow.
Right. Because
So these are all
something wasn't properly deprecated, because
exactly
things are
deprecation.
lingering or hanging on. Something got adopted or
Yeah,
inherited that had more privilege than it was supposed to, or something like that. Right. I mean,
exactly,
or all of the above.
exactly. So those are and that's the new world we live in, where because we are programmatic APIs, all these things are coming up. So it's very difficult for customers to manage. There's no more set and forget. And we kind of talk about this as a day two access. Day one is the initial access, but that's not the issue. That's the easy part. What happens in day two, day three, day five, day 10, day 90? Your configuration and your environment has changed completely. You
Yeah.
thought
Set
you
it
had
and
something,
forget
and
it.
now it's totally different.
That I mean, that is something that you don't hear anymore. It actually used to be, oh man, yeah, it's just set it and forget it, right? It was done and you're going, but that was then. This is now. I mean, I just think it's funny when we think of those terms and how much
Yeah, I mean,
it's
think of how you're
changed,
accessing,
right?
right? You're at home, you're at Starbucks, you're in a hotel, you're on a plane. That's how access is, getting access. You're not going into an office anymore.
Yep.
And this environment has changed quite dramatically. And now all of a sudden your new application pops up hey, app this and use an app to get access. So this is the economy is quite different right now. So this is a growing problem. We are seeing a massive volume of rise in identity threats, and I think we're still at the very first inning. By the way, we are not even close to where this thing is heading. And attackers have figured out the most easiest way for them to hack into is legitimate access.
Yep.
Take over an account, try to own an identity, hack into it, and then use legitimate access to, and then find their way. And so that's where I think we see the market, the industry, customers struggling with that.
It's the interconnectivity too, it seems, that exacerbates the problem, right? The fact that, I mean, everything in my life is connected to this big thing called the internet. So the just the when you start to look at uh, the interconnectivity and uh, the supply chain connectivity and just how everything is shifting digitally, right? This is the digital transformation. With it comes an associated threat or risk also because of the interconnectivity and everything's connected, right? I mean, it's definitely a double-edged sword.
And you mentioned the right word, interconnectivity, because people cannot see that, right? People
Correct.
see that interconnectivity, right? They know it's happening,
Yep.
and even in tools like people are not able to understand how somebody got access to something.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Talk about what you guys are doing in the world of AI, and I mean, is that having an impact in the identity space from your perspective? What's going on there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me use a simple example here, right? In many companies, let's say let's say we find out, hey, Grant should not have access to all these applications. Grant is not in this role anymore. You should, remove all the Grant's access to these applications.
Right.
People are very nervous of taking away access because they do not know, okay, what's the impact on Grant? So they're very afraid of taking out access.
Mm-hmm.
And so this always happens that even when you point out, hey, these are unnecessary access, risky access, take it out, they are reticent to do that. And why is that? Because they do not understand the impact of downstream applications. Hey, Grant may need these applications, down the line, or I might cut off access in some ways that wasn't intended. So they're unable to take action, even with given data. So
Mm-hmm.
what they want to say is, I cannot trust your data, so I cannot act upon it. So then what happens? Nobody takes out anything, and access is still there, and that's ground for the attackers to come in.
Yep.
So the AI, we're able to pinpoint exactly the chain of access, right? We're able to say, look, this is how Grant is getting access, and Grant's role has changed now. He's no longer in this group anymore in this role, and he
Right.
hasn't used access in the last, 6 months.
Right.
So it's easy, just take it out. So customers want evidence to take action, and with AI, we're able to generate evidence that we couldn't do before, and in an easy to use fashion. So the
Yep.
point is, you know, like you said, uh, you can take a horse to the water, you cannot make it drink in a scenario. We want to, that last mile is we want to provide evidence and trust
Yep.
the customers can take intelligent decisions. Hey, there is no reason for Grant to even have this access. Oh, by the way, and Grant is using all these devices. So he's actually a high risk user, and let's say Grant doesn't need access. He needs access, once a year. Fine, put him in a different policy that gives Grants this infrequent access or a
Right.
just-in-time access. You don't need Grant permanent access. So these are the
Yep.
various ways we help customers to automate and reduce the attack surface. And these are
Yep.
some examples where AI has come in very handy, where we're able to build trust and give precise context and
Mm-hmm.
intelligence for customers to take action.
Well, that's an assistant that can go and figure it out so
That's right.
much more effectively than
Yeah,
any person on your staff, even the best, right? Because the ability AI has to consider 360 degrees of options so much more quickly. It's really extraordinary. And I'm kind of excited about some of the ways as it all comes down to the prompts, man. Prompts are prompts are key in the world of LLMs and AI. At least that's what I'm learning, right? The difference a word makes is extraordinary. When you start looking at these big open LLMs and chat GPTs of the world, boy, that prompt that you feed that beast is absolutely so key on what you get back. I've just been amazed by that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's also a reason why we can start to generate natural language, right, for customers to understand and build the trust. It's no longer about Grant having nested groups or static or subgroups. These are
Right.
all tech terms nobody understands. The point is, look,
Exactly.
Grant doesn't need this access. His role has changed. He's not used access you've given him already for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of he's got a lot of sensitive access. Okay, on a risk spectrum, take it out.
I
Okay,
fit
and so
that
that
use case exactly in a previous job, exactly, where I moved and I was still getting emails with links that gave me access that I know I shouldn't have had access to in that new group. Perfect example.
exactly. And in customers, because of the growth in the cloud, new platforms they're building, they got multiple identity systems, not just one.
Right.
In the Active Directory used to be the one, but people have a lot of identity systems. They got 10, 20 systems. So that they don't talk to each other. Lots of silos.
Right.
They go in, so there are a lot of blind spots like this. And the other thing about the AI assistants is that you can spin them up any number of ways. You can they can keep on you can put human labor on this. This is
Hmm.
really costly for customers. They can hire these skills. These are deep tech
Right.
skills. So AI learns the patterns of access for an identity and starts to say, wait a minute, these are not consistent. I've never seen this access from this identity ever before. Why
Right.
is it showing? Is it really the account is compromised? So we can start to provide the compression, quick visibility with real intelligence behind this. People can take action versus waiting for some audit to happen and then take action. We're able to compress the time, and that's how things are on the cloud. Quick
Yep.
visibility, that the cloud can go faster, because the cloud is not going to slow down just because of a security issue. They're going to go fast no matter what.
Yep. Yep.
So we
Yep.
bring in that velocity of intelligence to customers. On the identity front, we are doing some great work on that.
That's awesome. So where can the listeners learn a little more about Stack Identity?
So we have a great website, of course, stackidentity.com. That's the first place.
Yep.
We have a very, very active LinkedIn channel. We continue to post a lot of interesting articles. We got a great website. If you go to our blog section, we have a number of blogs on the topic. Um, if you
Do you
want
guys
to,
offer any kind of like because you're a SaaS, right?
yeah. So
So if I want to expose one of my accounts, and what do you work? AWS,
we support all these
Azure,
cloud
what?
environments. We support all these
Okay.
cloud environments, and so to get started, we have a free assessment service called Sarah. Sarah is like an AI agent. So you download Sarah, you run this in your own environment, you attach to your own cloud accounts, you
Right.
scan. In about 45 minutes, we give you all the problems, okay, right there. And then you figure out, okay, what do I need to fix? Here's the visibility of all these things, why something is happening. Then you start to automate some responses. So it's a very easy to use tool.
Cool.
And you can download Sarah, and you can start with a single account or a single project or a single initiative, doesn't really matter. And then you start to get the visibility. Okay, where are the risky identities? Where are the identity threats? Where are the risky entitlements? How do I shrink this attack surface? Where am I going to fail audit? So all these questions Sarah answers quite easily, and use that as a springboard to then build a more comprehensive program to build a completely enterprise-wide focus around this.
Got it. Got it. That sounds cool. Sarah. And I can
Sarah,
get Sarah at stackidentity.com.
Correct.
That's really cool. It's clever, and I think, this is what more and more people want anyway, right? Show me. It's like, let me see what you can do.
Yeah.
And I want to service myself, essentially, right? That's the other thing. So many people in today's world want to be able to just do it themselves, learn it
Yeah. And
themselves, use it themselves.
people try to use spreadsheets, screenshots. It's pretty rough to look at how customers
The
are
way
dealing
they're
with it
doing this now, what
today.
solving
Exactly.
this, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
by the time they do a spreadsheet extract, it's already out of date. So Sarah runs continuously, right? So your environment changes continuously. You're adding new applications every day. Sarah changes all the
Yeah.
time. You run Sarah at your own frequency. You run it, twice a day, once a week, whatever it is. So it gives you the real-time visibility of what the threats are,
Got
and
it.
that is a great starting point for customers to see where do they need to focus the resources.
Right.
High-risk areas, compliance, failures, and things like that. So, and new projects. We're seeing, for example, a lot of focus on machine identities. Okay, where are they operating? What are they doing? Because unlike human beings, you cannot. There is no multi-factor authentication from machines.
Right. So will your tool surface identities that have been idle and maybe
Exactly.
haven't been used or haven't really
That's the
been
most basic
exercised?
of yeah, most basic
Say
because
that again. That's the most basic.
most of the time in the cloud environments, it's always over permission because developers control the entire environments. They don't like security. They
Yeah.
want to get all the access up front. So you have
It's easier.
easier.
Yeah.
They have a lot of access, and so they never use it. So very quick test is what we call as dormant access, unnecessary access, risky, excessive access. These are all things you're not even using, but you're hoarding this access. So get rid of all this stuff. So we get the journey of being able to kind of shrink the attack surface, reduce the blast radius,
Right.
and to really make sure that only the right identities have the right access for the right reasons. And that's the mantra we go by.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Venkat, this has been awesome. Man, I always love talking to you. You're such a smart guy. But it's fun to stay abreast to the new stuff, the hot stuff, the stuff that's really causing us pain that we need to address. And you guys seem to be right on it. So thanks a ton for being here, buddy.
Thanks, Grant. Always a pleasure to come on a show, and we should do it some other time.
Yeah, definitely. So please send my best to Sanjay and Ambrish and the team. Thanks very much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, a wonderful episode. Talk about a smart guy and long in the tooth when it comes to identity. Venkat, this guy's been around, but he stays young and fresh and is addressing some pretty serious issues that are right on the edge for all of us. So I encourage you, take a look at stackidentity.com. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have. Thanks so much for listening. Please like, share, tell your friends, and we'll look forward to having you back on the next episode of Talking Cloud. Thanks so very much.